The docking clamps released with a metallic hiss that reverberated through the burning torch's armored hull. Captain Marcus Vance, standing rigidly on the bridge, felt the familiar tremor that heralded the beginning of yet another voyage to the unknown. He watched the shimmering cerulean sphere of Earth recede on the main viewscreen, a bittersweet pang tugging at his gut. He rarely let sentimentality cloud his judgment, not after the years he'd spent staring into the face of war. Earth, the cradle of humanity, was now just another strategic asset, a vital supply depot in a game with stakes beyond comprehension. Despite being a part of the Alliance Council, Vance saw the true nature of war. He knew what it meant to lead men and women to certain death in a battle of hope, but his responsibility was to send them into the battlefield to give that glimmer of hope to their loved ones. "All systems nominal, Captain," Lieutenant Anya Petrova, her voice crisp and professional, announced from her station. "Quantum shift drive primed. Navigation lock established on Harmony's Reach." Vance nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Engage." With a silent surge of energy, the world around them dissolved into a swirling vortex of quantum light. They had severed the tangible link to Earth, hurtling towards a rendezvous with destiny. Marcus Vance was a man forged in the fires of a dying world. The Federation had made what use of such resources it had and forged some of Earth's best and brightest. After a childhood scrounging for survival in the ruined megacities of old Europa, he joined the Global Defense Force at 15, driven by a burning desire to protect what remained of humanity. He was built for war, a living weapon with the discipline and ruthlessness to execute the most difficult orders. He also held a deep-seated distrust for all that was alien. His wariness stemmed from what little the history books contained, and all the battles he had been sent to. From a young age, Marcus understood that you can't trust what you can't see, a lesson that stuck with him to this very day. But his experiences had also taught him the value of sacrifice, the importance of loyalty, and the unwavering courage that could bloom even in the most desperate of circumstances. These hard-won virtues were what had earned him the respect of his crew, the trust of his superiors, and ultimately, the command of the burning torch. Turning from the viewport, Vance addressed his crew, his voice a low, steady rumble that cut through the hum of the ship's engines. "We are entering uncharted territory, people. We know next to nothing about what awaits us at Harmony's Reach, but one thing is certain: we are humanity's first contact. Our actions here will determine the course of history for our species, and perhaps for the entire galaxy. Follow orders, trust your training, and remember why we are here." The message had reached to many of these crew members. The goal to protect their people, who can't fight with them. This was their way of showing their respect. A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the bridge, a silent affirmation of their commitment to the mission. Vance's leadership was subtle but firm. He would make sure that each member under his command were at a 100% at all times. For what was waiting for them was a threat unlike any other. His gaze lingered on one figure in particular, Dr. Eliza Morgan. She stood hunched over a console, her fingers flying across the holographic display as she analyzed reams of data with feverish intensity. Her lab coat, usually pristine white, was now stained with a kaleidoscope of exotic compounds, a testament to her tireless dedication. Morgan was a force of nature, a brilliant but driven scientist with an almost obsessive focus on her work. Her intellect was razor-sharp, her insights often bordering on the prophetic. It was Morgan's expertise in biological warfare that had convinced the Federation to offer assistance to the Aurora Stellar Alliance. And so a dangerous decision was made, leading to a chain of even more dangerous decisions. During meetings, the council members seemed to have a mutual agreement, an act that was out of her expertise, that put her on edge. The quantum shift ended with a jarring lurch, flinging the burning torch back into the familiar embrace of real space. Captain Vance braced himself against the console, his internal chronometer realigning to the new stellar coordinates. "We have arrived at Harmony's Reach, Captain," Lieutenant Petrova announced, her voice steady despite the sudden jolt. "All systems green. Awaiting clearance to approach." The main view screen flickered to life, resolving into an image that stole the breath from Vance's lungs. It wasn't the sterile, metallic construct he'd expected. Harmony's reach was a living thing. It resembled a vast, interconnected network of organic structures, resembling enormous trees whose limbs branched out in intricate patterns. Interwoven with these structures were shimmering energy conduits and crystal pathways, creating a harmonious fusion of nature and technology unlike anything he'd ever seen. Vance found himself staring at an orbital botanical garden on steroids. Sections of the station, encased in shimmering translucent membranes, revealed lush, terrace gardens suspended in zero gravity. Waterfalls cascaded down crystal surfaces, feeding vibrant ecosystems teeming with life. It was an explosion of organic beauty against the cold, unforgiving backdrop of space. Incredible, Dr. Morgan murmured, her eyes wide with a fascination that bordered on reverence. It's a living ecosystem, a self-sustaining symphony of life. The sheer scale of Harmony's reach, its intricate organic design, and the obvious dedication to the preservation of life, filled Vance with a conflicting mix of awe and unease. It was everything Earth was not, a stark reminder of the ecological devastation his own species had wrought upon its home world. "This is Harmony's Reach Control," a melodious voice echoed over the comms channel. "Welcome, Burning Torch. You are cleared for docking at Gateway 7. Please proceed with caution. The environment is sensitive." Vance acknowledged the transmission, issuing the orders for approach. As the Burning Torch moved closer, the details of the station became even more breathtaking. Bioluminescent flora glowed with an inner light, illuminating intricate patterns etched into the organic structures. Small, avian-like creatures with iridescent wings flitted through the gardens, scattering shimmering trails of light. The atmosphere felt almost sacred. Docking at Gateway 7, the Burning Torch sealed its access tubes to the Harmony's reach, and the team assembled into the landing zone. With them were Dr. Morgan, Lieutenant Adams, and 8 of their best security specialists. The trip was uneventful and the team reached a large chamber. As they entered, there were the faces of what appeared to be dignitaries in the coalition, many of whom were from the call earlier. Ambassador Lythe and Elder Glint awaited them, their expressions solemn and strained. Lythe, true to what Vance perceived on the viewscreen, was a Sylvan, and stood above 7 feet tall. A true testament to their species' dedication to the preservation of all life. He was almost a reminder to humanity to have the moral high ground, even when it was time to make very difficult decisions. "Captain Vance, Dr. Morgan," Lythe greeted, his voice a soothing balm that seemed to calm the very air around them. "We welcome you to Harmony's Reach. We are deeply grateful for your swift response to our plea." Glint's multifaceted eyes, however, held a different light. "We appreciate your willingness to assist us, humans," he said, his voice sharper and more guarded. "But forgive me if I harbor some reservations. Your reputation precedes you." Vance met Glint's gaze, unflinching. "We are aware of your concerns, Elder Glint," he replied, his voice carefully measured. "We are here to offer our help, not to repeat the mistakes of our past." The air crackled with tension, thick enough to cut with a disruptor blade. The two leaders studied each other, a silent battle of wills waged across the vast cultural divide that separated them. "The void is closer," Lythe said, breaking the silence. "We must show you all that it is capable of." Lythe gestured towards a large holographic display, where a series of images began to unfold. Worlds being devoured, planets collapsing into themselves, civilizations erased from existence. The sheer scale of the destruction was staggering, a testament to the terrifying power of the Void Horde. Vance felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He had seen war, had witnessed the devastation it could wreak. But nothing could have prepared him for this. This was not merely a conflict, but an annihilation, a cosmic cancer that threatened to consume the entire galaxy. "This footage was taken from exploration vessel of our Federation." Glint's voice resonated with a deep power. "But they have all since been wiped from existence. You sent what must have been at least 100 vessel without hope for recovery." Vance mumbled in disbelief. "The only way, for us to even be sure. But at what cost, I must ask myself," Lythe replied. "The numbers that you see here only accounts to 1% of what we have lost," Glint said. "What you're going to do, will never make up for all of what they have lost, what we have lost. Is there another alternative? Vance replied. If there are, please do tell. It was clear they had the support of humanity, but the rest of the council needed some more reason before they would make an action. It can't be said. Liz spoke quickly. We have been through this for countless centuries. And we were only a fraction as lucky as you are. It's more than that. Lyra replied in a panic and turned on her portable terminal. In a matter of milliseconds, Lyra had placed herself between both sides, as she had a sense of what would happen. That the source is not a faction or force, the Void is a universe. It's a virus that spreads from world to world. And after all our calculations, it can't even be reasoned with. Then chaos struck. The power went out and there were only red lights as the ship was heading towards an unknown location and emergency sirens. As the alarms and lights went on, the hologram changed to static. A deep, guttural voice echoed through the chamber, a sound that seemed to claw at the very fabric of space and time. The time of harmony is at an end. This was only the beginning. The station descended into chaos. Red lights flashed, alarms blared, and the soft, ethereal music that usually permeated Harmony's reach was replaced by a cacophony of panic. Panic had been the first thing to spread, the second was the Void Horde. A few hours had passed and everyone was barricaded. This didn't concern the humans that had arrived. Status report! Vance bellowed, his voice cutting through the din. Shields at 70% and falling, Captain. Multiple hull breaches reported in sectors 4 and 7. We're detecting massive energy signatures closing on our position. Petrova called back, her hands flying across her console. The void was already within, tearing its way through the station, corrupting everything it touched. The initial silence of the hive seemed to turn into the echoes of the souls swallowed up as they traveled throughout every channel possible. They had the opportunity to save the galaxy and the planet, however, to put everyone here at peace. But what was peace in this galaxy? The question came as sudden and natural. The Coalition are already working on defenses that are known to them, the rest is up to you. The human general and his soldiers charged out of the transport dock, where they now found themselves in chaos. They ran through the halls, pushing back the darkness that encroached deeper and deeper. Where are we headed, Commander? I want to set up a perimeter as fast as possible, but first we are going to see what we can deal with this swarm. As the unit progressed further, Vance and the men faced their first sign of the swarm. They were unlike anything they had seen. Some were insects, some were beasts, and some were just the remnants of those who died. But they kept on pushing forward, as the unit fought their way to the science division where Morgan was still stationed. All right, listen up, Vance barked, his voice echoing through the makeshift command post. We're setting up a perimeter around the science division. That's our priority. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and singed metal, red lights from every section of the halls. But their job was not to save this place, but to get the cure. Doc, what you need to do, we have your back covered. The commander gave one final stare before locking up and ordering the men to move out. The following fire was gruesome and something these soldiers were used to. But even in the midst of this horror, the doctor never looked away to see those dying for him, or all of them. It's ready, Commander, I finally have the results, Morgan shouted. Make sure this can even work, Doc, and prep it. I want to make sure before all this is for naught, Commander Vance shouted on comms. As the test started, the ship then shakes. There is too many. I'm detecting 5 waves coming, Adams said through the comms. Dr. Eliza Morgan stood alone in her makeshift lab aboard the research vessel Pastor, her face etched with exhaustion and a deep-seated moral conflict that threatened to consume her. Holographic displays shimmered around her, projecting intricate molecular structures of the void swarm, the enemy that threatened to extinguish all life in the galaxy. But it was the weapon, the one potential solution, that occupied her entire being. The lab, a cramped and utilitarian space amidst the organic splendor of Harmony's reach, had become her sanctuary, her prison, and her battlefield. For weeks, she had toiled relentlessly, driven by a fierce determination to find a weakness in the swarm's seemingly impenetrable armor. But now, on the cusp of a breakthrough, she found herself facing a dilemma that challenged the very core of her being. Her research had yielded a viable option. A tailored pathogen, designed to exploit a specific weakness in the swarm's unique biology, capable of disrupting its cellular functions and preventing it from reproducing. A biological weapon. The very words tasted like ash in her mouth. As a scientist, she had dedicated her life to the preservation and advancement of life, not its destruction. The images from the past still lingered in her heart. Back on Earth, the world that she loved, Morgan still had images burned in her memories. Images of her parents, coughing for air, while trying to bring medical aid to the ruined villages of the Outlands. As most people of Earth were fighting over territory, those who were not took on their own roles. That being, to make sure the world survived by any means necessary. But at what cost? In this new universe, she was stuck again in the same moral quagmire. The cycle of violence, it seemed, was an intrinsic part of sentient existence, a dark truth that echoed across the vast emptiness of space. She ran a gloved hand through her disheveled hair, her mind reeling. Was she truly any different from the genocidal entities she sought to destroy? Was she sacrificing her own humanity in the name of saving others? The faces of everyone that had been consumed by this threat appeared in her mind to stop what was happening to them again. If the cost to pay was to make this universe safe, what choice was there? The images on the displays flickered, shifting from molecular structures to holographic renderings of entire worlds consumed by the swarm. The statistics were horrifying: billions dead, civilizations erased, and entire ecosystems reduced to sterile, lifeless husks. What right did she have to impose her moral scruples on the countless trillions of lives that were at stake? To condemn them to oblivion because she couldn't stomach the idea of using a weapon she deemed immoral? The calm channel crackled to life, pulling her from her tormented reverie. "Dr. Morgan, this is Captain Vance. Do you have an update?" His voice, usually so steady and assured, held a note of urgency that cut through her to the bone. She knew what he was asking, what the entire alliance was waiting to hear. But she hesitated, the weight of her decision pressing down on her like a physical burden. "Yes, Captain," she finally replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I have a viable pathogen. It targets the swarm's unique biological network, disrupting their cellular functions and preventing them from reproducing." "Effective?" Vance asked, his voice terse. "Extremely," Morgan confirmed. "In lab conditions, it was nearly 100% effective. We think that it is the same for all the Bay Dan Wukong life forms, and believe this can be our only way to buy the Alliance enough time for everything." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines and the distant alarms. Vance, a man of action, understood the complexities of the situation. He also understood the terrible cost of inaction. "What are the risks, Doctor?" he finally asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Morgan took a deep breath, steeling herself for the inevitable. "The primary risk is adaptation," she said. "If the swarm can adapt to the pathogen, it could render it useless, and potentially even strengthen them. However, as long as they haven't adapted, this can be our saving grace to buy our people time to flee." The chances were a gamble that they couldn't be so sure. The thought of failure was crippling her. Vance fell silent once more, contemplating the information. It was a high-stakes gamble, but it was one they had to take. The clock was ticking. "All right, Morgan, do what needs to be done," Vance said. "I'll need time to synthesize a viable sample, and a secure way to get it inside the biosystem of Helios," she said, running diagnostics to come to the conclusion. "At least a couple of hours." "We'll get you that time, Morgan," Vance replied firmly. "Do what you can." As the connection severed, Vance sat in his chair. All was resting on a single person. Their last resort. But as the data kept coming in, he understood this was wrong, and had been from the start. In the coalition headquarters of the Silent Dawn, as the fleet began to organize themselves, Dr. Morgan looked through the schematics they had provided to them. "There is a fatal flaw in all this, sir, and I think I can help." The two were in deep thought, and the tension was at an all-time high. But something was wrong, or Morgan felt there was. The pieces just didn't fit. The core swarm units didn't have a weakness. Can we even do this? Asked Morgan. I don't like it, you don't like it. But we have no choice. And as the two were stuck in place, a new image had been displayed to the screen in front. It was in their message. Morgan pointed. The screen changed to various lines of codes and characters that had been embedded into the message, which were hard for even her to decode. But there was one key point in them she was interested. It's not about the units themselves. It's the planet. What was the Plan B and its cost? It was all too late, with explosions on the ships that would be accompanying it to the new world to escape this hell. Everyone was in alert. We have enemies incoming. The ships are being attacked. We need help. There were people dying, and for nothing, he had to keep pushing on even when everything around him was falling apart. Just have the new adjustments downloaded, set and ship out. We need to get this over with. I understand, sir. Get ready, it will be a bumpy ride. Back to the command room, a new hologram appeared. It was a member of the Federation. Earth Command is sending the coordinates of a special location, he said. It might be a risky plan, but we have no choice. They all knew what it meant, and what the cost was. As the coordinates were downloaded to the ship, Morgan entered and approached Vance. In her hands were a device. All right, Doc, let me know if it's all set. Thank you, Commander. Morgan gave a bow as he walked away. As Morgan went to the pod, it quickly turned to the commander. There are problems, Commander. Something is interfering with the calculations. Morgan's eyes became wide with fear as she saw the potentiality of not succeeding. What is that supposed to mean? There is no knowing how things will turn out. But the most important thing you need to know to make sure you return safely and we follow the plan. Can I trust you too? Morgan was silent, as she was looking back and forth on the plan. It was a dangerous one, but she trusted it. Just come back safely, Morgan said as she shut the door. 5 minutes to ignition, a voice said on the comms. All right, time to make sure we fulfill this to the end, Vance replied as his small band of team was preparing for their operation. The ship was ready to depart. But little did Vance know. This would be a death sentence to most if they failed. The firebreak shuddered violently as it sliced through the churning atmosphere of Hyperion. Lightning, vast and terrifying, arced across the viewport, briefly illuminating the storm-racked landscape below. The ship was a coffin in the sky. Inside the cockpit, Captain Marcus Vance, his face illuminated by the flickering displays, wrestled with the controls. Lieutenant Adams sat beside him, her hands flying across the navigational panel, her brow furrowed in concentration. Turbulence is increasing, Captain, she announced, her voice tight with strain. We're approaching the vortex layer. We've reached point of no return, Captain. Vance glanced at the timer on his console. 40 minutes until the catalyst had to be deployed. 40 minutes until the small chance that humanity may be able to survive this long. There was little to be said. Those remaining all looked at each other, a farewell to a memory that had once was. It was now time to show if these Deathworlders, or human to some, were going to save the universe, or destroy it. Let's get this done, Vance finally said. There's something you should know, sir, before we get too far up ahead to proceed this. Morgan's voice echoed on the comms in this suicide trip. The commander nodded and with that, continued to move forward. The storm got worse and worse as the engine became at risk of dying at any second, but the two knew that the fate of Helios was in their hands, and everyone else in the galaxy. Reed and Morgan remembered the people of Earth. The good and bad, how people would band together when they saw a common cause. The thought gave them hope as they understood they were about to change their world. If they came back or not. After the long silence, an alarm started to blare. They had been hit, and things got worse from there. We have been hit. Report. Sir, the engine is not working and we are losing control. As the ship began to tumble due to the impact. The two tried desperately to turn the system back on while those who have been assigned as their guardian, to make sure they don't get ambushed or get stopped. If we don't get there soon, the swarm will wipe us before the charge happens. It's our duty and honor to make sure you do. I can do this. Trust, Morgan shouted at the end. There was so much to say, but as the ship got closer and closer, all that Morgan could see was not death, but opportunity for another world to prosper, and to start a new cycle of birth and hope. I have a plan. I need you to trust me, Commander. Engines, you'll set the timer, and I will take the sample. Set to manual release? Understood. A reply from Adams. The ship continued to fall, as it descended quickly as Morgan put on the suit and prepared for departure. I know that you might think it's crazy for someone like to do this, right? I mean someone who has the opportunity, who can help the future be saved and take all the credit, but that ain't me. What I know is that this has to end now. That is correct, Doctor, and I respect it. I will be ready soon to put in the coordinates. Adams replied with a shaken voice. She then went to contact the remaining people on board. As we have all agreed, we will stand until they have finished what they need to do. As the ship slowly began to tear from the immense pressure in the atmosphere, the end was getting closer, so the time to get out must come. As the two parted ways, they both exchanged a look. Nothing but respect. I'll see you on the other side, Morgan, Vance said as he opened the door for the doctor to move out. With every moment that passed, the light became ever so bright. Time has come. As Morgan began to adjust the machine, she also muttered, "Goodbye." The explosion was a white light. A cleansing inferno in the heart of darkness. It was more terrifying than beautiful, as the world saw and felt this destructive force. What is going on down there? I can't track them anymore. Life spoke with alarm over the calm. But what came after was but a deafening silence. Both hero and the villain, both destroyed and in single motion. The world was changed as an entire system has been destroyed. It had been the most horrifying and greatest event for the Coalition to have happened. What do we do now? There's no chance for any of them to survive. Glint asked. Liz spoke. Those humans, they have shown a way of fighting that we had not fathomed. A force with enough conviction that it's their only option. Now the weight had been placed on Lith, and their shoulders could be the salvation to end the swarm, or their downfall. There was a long and deafening silence as he got there. All channels send a message now. Inform each civilization to remember them. From now on, a new galaxy will begin, and those that know to act quick will inherit the flame. The silence after Helios died was more profound than the void it had sought to contain. The sensors that had once screamed with activity were now eerily still, the data streams choked with static. A world, teeming with trillions of potential lives, extinguished in a blinding flash. On the bridge of the silent dawn, Ambassador Light stared at the empty void where Hyperion had once been, a cold dread gripping his heart. The crystal structures on his skin pulsed with a dull, lifeless rhythm. He had witnessed countless deaths, but none had ever struck him with such brutal finality. Had we done it right? Was all he could think of. The plan had succeeded, for now the tide had turned against the swarm. But at what cost? The holographic display still projected the threat on the sector. However, there was another problem that was rising: the other council members. As the transmission of General Harris came through, a loud voice roared, "You cannot do this! We must stop these monsters! What these people did was an act of horror we must dash!" The transmission suddenly stopped. All that came through were nothing but statics. The broadcast had been cut. "It has started," Lith announced. "Our people cannot accept what has been done. What we agreed upon. Then you must understand the necessity of all this," Reed replied. His face, still streaked with grime and exhaustion, bore a newfound weight. He had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had stared back. "We did what we had to do to buy our side and yours time. We're too far in to turn around now." He paused, a flicker of grief crossing his face. "Earth is in a position that you do not understand. As long as we exist, the world is always threatened." Those on board that came from Earth nodded in acceptance. They were now protectors, no matter the cost. After a moment of understanding, a new message appeared. I think what we should address more is the fact that Dr. Morgan is still on board with the knowledge. I think that is best if Dr. Morgan were to join you to further her research, so she won't have a repeat incident. Thank you, Admiral. Vance spoke. Dr. Morgan would be transferred to your ship. But do know, with her leaving, you leave your home defenseless. The ship began to make its way. This will be a war unlike any other. We'll start with a new future that has been paved for the Alliance. The Silent Dawn has begun. The people believe that they have been saved by God. Morgan, for what had felt a lifetime, stared outside of the ship, looking at what is now called Helios. There are those that are now calling you the bringer of destruction, while others as the true angel of the Alliance. Glint spoke. They will know when it needs to happen. The data you provided and collected on Helios, she said with a low tone. It seems that what the scientist was right. Every living unit shares what they have done. From the cellular level, it's truly terrifying. Now only with everything that was lost, that the future is bright. Glint spoke back. A long silence stretched across all. This was a new path to take, and with all those in the Silent Dawn, a goal must be reached. We may have burned a new page, but now the real stories begin. Years passed. The immediate threat of the Void Horde, for then, was contained but not eliminated. But at a high cost. Humanity had secured its place in the Aurora Stellar Alliance, not as just another member, but as an honored and feared protector. They were the shield against the darkness, the ones who would stand on the front lines, making the difficult choices that others could not bear. The image of the burning torch would be forever ingrained in the galaxy's heart, the eternal monument to the courage of 17 souls and more as ships have lost their way.